everybody. Thanks for joining my masterclass on pricing strategies for inflationary and high-cost environments. Myself, I worked at Zalando before I started 7 Learnings. Actually, before Zalando, I worked as a consultant for AT Kearney, which is a consulting company focused also on purchasing and pricing. And I was working on the pricing end, and I was quite shocked when I started at Zalando 9 years ago to see this approach that they have implemented on their end, which I would call like a predictive approach. I already knew, like from my experience, how everybody else is doing it, and so for me this was really good to see how a very structured approach would look like. And that's why we founded 7 Learnings, actually 7 years ago already. We're focusing on predictive pricing, but also predictive ordering and predictive marketing decisions. Today I'll focus on the pricing side, actually. We're covering recent market developments at the beginning, just because I think it's important to talk about what's happening in the market at the moment. I think it's like so much going on, I feel, and I would even think that more is even coming, more developments are coming than what we have seen so far. And I think that requires some thinking on how to respond to what is changing. So that's the response strategies are basically for retailers and brands, how to respond on what's happening, what we're seeing in the market. Then I wanted to cover some real-world examples of price changes of specific retailers, how they dealt with it, especially during the Corona period, when we had so much inflation. The number 4 would be simulated strategies. So how can you simulate responses before you even make a decision on what you want to do? And then there will be time for questions in the end. But again, I'd also love you to be interactive in between, and then ask questions whenever you have them. Again, just put them into a questions tab or the chat, and I'll try to respond. Okay, so let's start with a quick poll on how did you react to cost increases so far. If you go to the poll section, there should be a poll, and you can submit your vote there on how did you react to cost increases so far. The poll section is on the bottom, and you can pick one of those. The options are like flat price increases, differentiated price increases, and no reaction so far. So when it comes to market developments, let's maybe jump into it, what we're seeing in the market. Obviously, since this is about inflation environments, we can see that we had this crazy Corona period where we had, this is, I think, the US inflation rate, where we had more than 8% inflation. And since then, it was going down. It was going down rapidly in 2023, but then it still was going down since then in a more flat way. But now we see 2026, it's picking up again because of the war in Iran. And I think that's because that's one of the reasons why it's becoming more relevant. And on top, of course, in the US, you also have the tariffs, which increase prices even further. So that's just kind of where it feels like we're thrown back into this time, which we already know from the Corona period, which was quite problematic. I think this just makes this whole topic a lot more relevant. Then another thing that I found was from the Fed of New York, also the fact that consumers are responding to it. So we see that low income, middle income, or also high income households are reducing their spending in real terms. This is just because wages are not increasing as fast as the inflation is in these periods, and therefore the spending goes down in real terms. And this is obviously a problem for retailers because that means that you're selling less product in general. Then another thing that I think is also linked, well, it's another trend which is also important to consider, is that we still see marketplace shares go up everywhere globally. I mean, here in Europe, we're still pretty low actually, with 60%, but it's also been rising since 2023. But in Asia, we're already like almost at 100%, but even at this high level, it's still growing. And in Americas, we're also seeing growth. So basically, we're seeing growth everywhere. And from a strategic perspective, we can see that, marketplaces are more and more dominant. And the other thing with marketplaces that we're seeing, at least with our customers, is that marketplaces often increase complexity for brands. Yeah, because because this is not one marketplace, obviously, but these are multiple marketplaces, and to cover them all and to cover all their specific needs in terms of what data they're using, what campaigns they're doing, what pricing measures they have, the cost is different on all of these marketplaces. It just means that this is difficult to manage, more and more difficult to manage for brands typically, to be listed on all of them and to handle them in a nice way. And this will become more important because most likely there will be more marketplaces coming. Now we see that already. OpenAI thinks about becoming a marketplace on their own, and you could imagine Gemini also becoming something like a marketplace at some point. So that just means there will be even more complexity from these changes. Another thing that I see is picking up. I think this was an original estimation to be at 75% in 2050. The AI assisted shopping. I don't like to call it agentic shopping because people they don't think about this as the same thing. But I call it AI commerce market share, or like what I mean with that is like, what is the market share of consumers making shopping which is assisted by AI? And I think this is growing a lot faster than expected. We already have numbers even for last Black Friday where like a lot of people used LLMs to inform themselves about products. There are in Europe at least not so many direct implementations where you can directly shop through an assistant, but this is coming, and it will also have a huge impact, obviously. Again, this will basically be another marketplace, but one of the changes that this drives is that the consumer sees a lot less products when they are buying. So this market share, or like this development, is also something we have to have in mind. Overall, I would say that means that the sellers, like brands or retailers, are kind of squeezed in the middle. On the one hand, they have rising costs, and that there's no way around it. You can't change that. But then even on top, you have often higher elasticities because consumers are like more price sensitive now, since they have less real money to spend in these inflationary periods. And therefore, whenever you are reacting with a direct price increase, you're losing, or you risk losing, a lot of volume. And that depends obviously on specific products, but in general, there is this squeeze happening at the moment. Did I forget anything, or is that before we get into response strategies, is that what you're seeing, or would you add something? Maybe adding it to the questions or to the chat. Love to get some feedback here. Okay, then I'll just move on. So the second part would be response strategies. Now that we see that this is happening, like, how can you respond to it? So first of all, I think the first thing I would always recommend, because I'm seeing lots of retailers saying, okay, we just have to adopt ChatGPT. That's my solution. That's not a good way of responding, I think. I think a good first starting point would be to prioritize use cases. obviously AI can help, but you can't do everything at the same time. You just won't have the resources to do all of that. So you have to kind of think about like what is the most impactful strategy that brings you the best return on investment. And I think we are seeing this a lot at the moment. Everybody has tried Claude Code now, and now they realize that it's crazy expensive, and they don't make more revenue from using Claude Code. Yeah, I think that's also use case, and it's valid and it's helpful. But the question is like, how much money do you want to spend on it, and how easy is it to implement? So the feasibility is important, and the business value is important. This is a study from Gartner, which actually shows that pricing and promotions, markdown optimization is relatively easy to change because, yeah, even on a marketplace, it just means you need to send over a different price, and it directly will change how much you sell, and it will also typically have a pretty high business impact. I mean, Claude Code would be probably also relatively easy to implement, but it doesn't have a high business impact. And I think this is the first thing. So first you need to think about like your business, what is important in your business, and then you need to prioritize these use cases and say, this is important, this can bring me value. And then you can start thinking about what is the solution in this use case that gets me there, that gets me that value. Yeah, so there's others like, I think which ones are on top as well. In-store shelf availability. So this is about predictions. This is obviously also an area that is important to know, like how much, like to make demand predictions in general. And I would also add marketing as an important topic. Now, yeah, what are like to assess the business value? I think sometimes it's a bit abstract. I think what you can also check is where you're spending the money, basically. So if you look at your P&L and you, this is an example from Amazon for a fashion product. Let's say you are selling something for 100 euros on Amazon.de. Then you are typically spending 30 euros on discounts. Yeah, and that's what I'm called business value in this case. Yeah, because you're spending so much money on discounts, it's important. This is likely to drive business value because you're spending so much money on it. You're spending even more money on discounts than on purchase prices. So yeah, this would be ordering, like purchase price would be an ordering optimization, but also the discount is super important. Logistic costs are also linked to heavily linked to returns. So they are also predictable, and in at least in our pricing solution, we're also predicting returns, and we're predicting logistic costs. We're also predicting marketing costs, and as well commission costs, which are often price dependent. So you can see that although you can also work on customer service, but it's just 3% of your cost actually, and actually these other costs are like 90% of your cost. So it's just more useful to work on things that cover 90% of your cost than it is to work on something that just covers 3% of your cost. I think this breakdown looks different for every company in the world, and this is how I would assess business value and prioritize my use cases based on where I spend my money, basically. Yeah. Then one thing I actually, yeah, I think is underestimated. Let's say that is especially for pricing. It's extremely important to decide where the pricing decision should be made. Yeah, pricing is a topic where like everybody has an opinion on. From like merchandising, obviously, buying department has an opinion, BI has an opinion, maybe internally. Even a CEO has an opinion on pricing. So it's important to say like who is responsible for what internally in pricing. I can just like when I go back to my Zalando times, there was some responsibility in the pricing team, which was central. There was some responsibility in the category team still, where they were doing decisions on their own and kind of overrode the decisions of the central team. And then the markets also had campaigns. So you had kind of the pricing responsibility. The governance was not very clear. It was driven by three different giant organizations with thousands of people working in each of them, actually. And so that's not a good governance. Good governance is if you are clearly saying who's responsible, who makes the final decision. That has to be one person. My recommendation would clearly be a central pricing team or marketing and pricing team. And the rest, of course, can be involved in the process. They can deliver input or rules, guardrails, for example. And I can say, hey, don't discount new products more than 40%, for example. That's okay. But the final decision should be in an analytical team in the end. And if that's not implemented, it's difficult to reap all the benefits of the pricing function, actually. Yeah, because then you have just a lot of opinions and people override each other and there's no clear decision made in the end. I would say today in many companies, it's still not centralized. And it's not a expert function. And I think that is, still a clear recommendation from my end to change that. And that pricing person also needs a lot of power, because otherwise these merchandising teams are often very powerful. They will overrule the pricing team if they don't have enough power. So this pricing team has to report to the C-level directly. Otherwise, they are not. I mean, otherwise they just won't be able to do anything in the end. Okay. The other thing that I'm keep saying is that rule-based automation isn't perfect. So I would say that even today, probably 80% of the products that are sold based on rule-based decisions, and that is a human coming up with some rules, and then these rules are executed and uploaded. And hopefully people are doing the impact review in the end, but in many cases they are not. Yeah, so that means that somebody came up with a rule at some point, and then it's just there and it's executed, and nobody really knows why it's there, but it's just there. And people also not know what the impact is in the end. That's just the reality in most companies. And that's not perfect because, first of all, it's not clear who actually set the rule. Why was that rule really there? And what is the rule? What would happen if we not have the rule, actually? Now, let's make an example. Rule, it's like, okay, I follow the lowest Amazon price, for example, on a product. Or a rule is that I never go above recommended retail price. Yeah, that's rules, and they can be very expensive in this world because, for example, this rule of never going above recommended retail price, it might be necessary in these inflationary periods to go above the recommended retail price. I'm seeing that with many customers actually at the moment. It's the old recommended retail price is too low. You have to go above that price to make a profit even. In the more predictive world, you can still set rules. You can even set exactly the same rules, but the benefit is that you get directly an impact review and a kind of what I call a scenario. I give an example in the end, where you can actually see, okay, what would happen if I execute this rule, or and then you can only upload when you are happy with the results, with the predicted results. And the other thing is that you can set targets. You can say, okay, I want to maximize profit, or I want to maximize revenue in an extreme case, or you want to be somewhere in between, or you want to go for 80% sales rate at the end of the season as a target. So this target-based steering is also something, that helps you to use less rules. In general, I would say if you map the possible revenue and profit of using pricing, exit pricing is really the worst. You should not do that anymore. Then after that, is rule-based pricing. It's better because it's at least already automated. But predictive pricing can give you more profit at the same revenue, or more revenue at the same profit. yeah, I think everybody will migrate at some point to predictive solutions, especially for pricing. Yeah, the fourth recommendation from my side is to use predicted elasticities. Obviously, this is a super difficult topic to get that right. In this graph here, you see the price. I mean, the predicted sales before returns over the price. And these bubbles are basically historical prices that you have had live already for your products on your shop. And you can see that here for this example, the lower you go with the price, the more on a normalized basis you are selling. And of course, and the blue one, this is the curve. This is our prediction basically. And of course, this curve looks different on each marketplace, for example, right? If you're selling on Amazon, it might be more elastic than if you're selling on your own shop. Typically on marketplaces, it's more elastic than on your own shop, or if you're on Google Shopping, for example. And so this is important to understand, like how elastic is the demand reacting on price changes, and obviously also for this whole topic of inflation in inflationary periods. Of course, what changes is the profit that you're making with these prices. Yeah, because we are not only predicting sales before returns, but when you know your purchase prices, which went up, and you know tariffs, and you know commission costs went up, you know logistic costs went up on marketplaces, you know maybe the return rates and the cost of returns is going up. And if you know all of that, you can also calculate the profit that you're making at these different price points, which is exactly what we're doing. And then you can upfront kind of see, okay, what happens if I reach these price points, and what is the impact of changing the price given these different costs that I now get. And the tricky part is that this has to be done by marketplace and by sales channel, because the commission costs are very different, the elasticities are very different for each channel, and also the return rates. For fashion, for example, return rates are like 60% on Zalando, and they're more closer to like 30% on Amazon. So this all affects the cost, and that has to be considered when you're making your pricing decision. Okay. Then number 5, one other thing which is very, very dramatic, I would say, because there is this short-term optimization that we just looked at, basically what you see here, what we call profit here in this curve. Yeah, this is basically what I was just talking about, actually. So here you have this curve for the sales, and then if you have that curve and all the costs related to it, you can create this blue curve here, what we call the profit curve. And this is for one product. You can say, okay, if I'm sitting at $107, this is going to be my profit, and that prediction will change based on your other costs and on this on the return rates, on the commission costs, and everything else. And that is predicted. And here you can see that short term, the maximum would be to go to lower your price. But long term, that means until the end of liquidation of this product, it would be better to increase the price. And this quite often happens. An example would be simply a product where you didn't buy enough stock. It doesn't make sense to actually lower the price on a product where you don't have enough stock. And this isn't always easy to determine, because you need to know, like, what is the seasonality of this product, right? Let's assume it's a summer product. Let's assume it's an early summer product, and it's the season is ending in October, or like end of August, let's say. Then how do you know that this product is overstocked with regards to the end date of August? Yeah, for this, you need a long-term prediction until end of August to know if you will be able to sell this product until then or not. Yeah, and even so, what I'm saying is, even if you get the short-term prediction right, you need to also make a decision if you are overstocked or understocked with regards to the long-term end date, if you are in a seasonal situation and you want to sell out that product. And I see many customers which are struggling with overstock at the moment. And in this case, it can make sense to actually go lower. So this curve could also be different, right? You could also have lower maximum long-term profit at lower prices. And sometimes it makes sense to go down with your price, even make losses in the short term if you are avoiding a long-term liquidation and loss with that. Yeah, and I think that's I don't think many retailers are doing this well yet. This trade-off between short and long term, and it's a big leverage. I would say the short-term optimization has already a leverage of like 10-15% profit increase, but the long term has even higher profit increase if you're considering write-offs on these products at the end of the liquidation. Yeah, and then another optimization leverage, which we also looked for at Zalando, was kind of making marketing and pricing decisions together. In this case, you do not only have a prediction for what happens when you change your price, but you also have a prediction for what happens if you change your marketing decision. And then, yeah, as an example, if you're priced at 10 euros, maybe you're losing already money with 10 euros and you don't have any money to spend on cost per click, for example. If you are priced at 35 euros, then actually you don't have any conversion left. Yeah, so you are making a lot of margin, but you cannot convert the product. Therefore, you're also losing money. And yeah, pricing, since it's driving the conversion, it is very linked to your marketing performance. And therefore, whenever you make a price change, you basically also have to think about what you're doing with your marketing spending, because it will directly impact your conversion rate. And most teams are not doing that yet. Okay, I think I have to look a bit at the time. Any questions so far? That was the response strategies now. Anybody brave enough to ask a question or a follow-up question, maybe? Okay. Then I'll just move on. Again, you can just add questions as you like. Yeah, so one real-world example I wanted to cover was Zalando price increases in 2022 or 23. Zalando decided to increase prices by 5 to 15% in Germany, and they did that mostly on like branded products and not so much on private label products, actually. But then, yeah, they had also less what they call mega sales, and then at the same time, they also did more customer-specific coupon campaigns to offset this. And I think this is a nice strategy in general, because they were able to actually cover rising costs without collapsing the growth numbers in a too crazy way. Or affecting inflation too crazy. On the other hand, yeah, there were some price-sensitive customers, or especially in new customer acquisition for younger people. It's difficult at these price points, and those you don't even have them in the shop yet, basically, and you cannot send them kind of a voucher to reactivate them. I think that part wasn't working so well, but there's not so much you can do about it in a way. Yeah. So in general, I think this was still a positive example because they got what they wanted. They still paid with new customer growth for this, and some of the kind of low-end shoppers, they are not even going on Zalando because of the price level. Yeah, but overall, I think still okay. One topic I think that didn't go so well, and I think that happened not only for this bakery group, which increased prices also during the Corona times. I think this happened to a lot of branded products during Corona times. They did price increases, and initially it worked really well. They increased revenue and profit at the same time. But what they didn't see is that they also lost a share of margin, and this sometimes happens a little bit later. So basically you can imagine it that you increase prices. Typically, most customers are still buying it, and then more and more customers during the weeks, they are realizing that the price difference between the branded products and the no-name products is going up. And if you would have done an A/B test in the beginning, it looked like very, very positive, and then later on, week after week, you're losing more of your customers to the private label brands. So I don't think this went well, actually, because they lost share of volume in the end. And in long term, they lost also customers, profitability, and revenue. It looked good in the short term, but it doesn't necessarily work in the long term. So I think many supermarket brands didn't do a good job in this period, actually. And this is just one example where it didn't go well. Yeah, another example which also went in a similar direction, IKEA did increases also in 2023. Yeah, it went also well in the beginning. IKEA also has kind of the brand power to see this through, but you also see, well, in this case, even these negative media effects. So there's like newspapers picking up the Billy and Pax price increases. And that's kind of the opposite of what the IKEA strategy typically is, which is, okay, I pick some products which are very, very cheap and which are very visible and in the media even. And I might even lose money on those, but then people come to the shop and they buy all kinds of other things, and I get my margin on those other products. But here, this was the other way around, actually. Yeah, so they actually got pretty negative coverage of these price increases, and they rolled them back. And here they tried also to this rollback. This is a rollback example, actually. In 2024, they went down with the prices again and made a big campaign about it. Okay, I got a question from Rachel. Hi, Felix. Which message you would recommend for measuring long-term impact where A/B test is not possible? Yeah, simulations. Yeah, so because that's the thing. You often you cannot test everything. Let's imagine you are in the day-to-day business, right? Your boss comes in and tells you, okay, you need more revenue push next week or something, and wants you to come up with a strategy for that. You can't always run an A/B test because you have to change something, right, on your pricing, and you can't change everything at the same and running a test A/B test for that change that you're doing. There's kind of a pressure on it, and yeah, and then I don't know, Zalando is doing a campaign XYZ, and you have to decide you want to do it or not. So there's a lot of cases where you have to make fast decisions, and you don't have the time to run A/B tests in so many cases, and therefore you need to add the capability of running simulations. You need to simulate different options, different strategic options, like this IKEA here. Yeah, you have to simulate. IKEA for sure did that. Like, what happens if I'm staying at this high price level? I have my higher margin on these products, but I'm losing market share to other customers, to competitors, or I'm lowering my prices again, and I'm gaining a share of wallet. Yeah, but I'm losing money on these specific products, or at least some margin. And then you simulate that, and then based on the simulation, you make a decision. But for sure, yeah, the solution is simulation, because tests are very expensive and difficult to evaluate also. So you can do, when you implement a system, make a big A/B test, but on the smaller decisions ad hoc during the business times, you cannot run A/B tests all the time. It's not possible. It's just too expensive. And they're not valid enough on a smaller basis. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the question, Rachel. Yeah. So I think as a summary, yeah, everybody is struggling with this. Really, absolutely everybody. And I think it's clear that yeah, there's kind of, you have to do something often, but you cannot do kind of this blunt price increase on everything. Doesn't work so well. I think Zalando was doing it kind of well, also offsetting it with these voucher campaigns. In supermarkets, I think this wasn't going well. Again, there was a lot of people doing it, and they didn't consider the long-term effect, and they lost customers to no-name brands because of that. IKEA realized this and also went back down again. Yeah, so I think that's what we see in the real world. And yeah, now coming back to the last part, simulated responses. That is kind of our answer to it from 7Learning's perspective. You don't. It's not like AI gives you kind of a black box and it says, okay, this is the best response. This is what you have to do. It enables you to simulate things up front and then to sit at the table and make a decision what you want to do based on simulations rather than based on gut feeling or opinions in the room. So I prepared like 3 scenarios as an example in our demo project. So scenario 1 would be to have a flat price increase of 5%. And you can simulate that using rules. Scenario 2 is you match the minimum competitor price. This is again a rule-based approach. And scenario 3 is a bit more advanced. It's actually without rules at all. It's just maximizing profit. Yeah, so 3 different ways of responding. And then what you can see is that the predicted results are very, very, very different. And again, this is a demo project. Of course, I can't show you customer data here, but this is close to reality. So price increase here gives you 10 million in profit for a certain, I think, 2 weeks period. I did this prediction. 34 million in revenue and a margin of 30.46%. The profit maximization was actually giving even more profit, like 10.7 million, and similar revenue, but at an overall higher margin. So actually the price increase and the maximum profit is pretty close in this case. And then what is striking, I think this is where many retailers and brands are sitting at the moment, is match minimum competitor price is often like, yeah, of course, the most revenue driving scenario, but it's coming at the cost of very, very low margins and therefore lower profit and often lower absolute profit in euros. So I got from Casper a question: if we reduce discounts on Zalando and instead increase ZMS marketing spend, what is the best way to measure whether this improves overall profitability, not just revenue? And how do you recommend finding the sweet spot between price level and ZMS spend? Yeah, this is exactly what I was trying to show with this slide earlier. This one here, right? So I think to find the sweet spot between marketing spend and price or like discounts, because if you want to grow 5%, you can increase your discounts, or you can increase your marketing spend. The question is, what is better? And to understand that, I think that's even a decision that happens on product level. I would say products that convert really well in your marketing campaigns, it's often better to even increase marketing spend on those products. But products which are not converting well, maybe also because of your pricing, they should not be in that marketing campaign so much. So I would make that decision whether to put more money on ZMS or more money on discounts into, I mean, first of all, create this prediction that you see here for each product, and then make a decision on product level where to put yourself, on which discount level and which marketing spend. The problem with ZMS actually is that we are struggling with them to get the marketing data in, and we are still working on improving that access there. But yeah, in general, I would make that trade-off between discount and marketing spend on product level. Does it answer your question? Yeah. Again here, yeah, basically the response is simulation. And then once you have a like a marketing, you can even run a marketing test, right, and set this up. and run like marketing decisions over an optimizer like this, and then you can measure once at least in the beginning with the project what the impact is. We've been doing this a lot on Google Shopping actually. Yeah, because most people are using Google Shopping only with like PMax campaign, and that's like it's not a very good, not very optimized, I would say, because then just Google spends crazy amount of money, which is generally inefficient. And you can run shopping campaigns which are basically saying, okay, I want this T ROAS on this product, and this would actually give you exactly this level what we're seeing here. I mean, this example is high cost per click, but you can also see it as like low ROAS. And this aggressiveness level should be set by yourself on product level. I think this is what this is where the pricing and marketing team can collaborate also. Okay. So I was here, right? Yeah. So these are the three examples here, right? So I think this is the match minimum competitor price is often actually even worse. So it's even in terms of margin even worse in reality. And today I see just like too many retailers are just kind of I just going with that rule, and it's not working that well in the end, and you can't get rid of it. And I think you don't have to turn it off completely. On some products you have to be competitively priced, but the trick is to find out on which products. With regards, Casper is just writing again that ZMS pulling the data is difficult. Yeah, we're trying to get a specific access to Zalando to get this marketing data out of that system. We've been asking for it for I think 2 years already, trying to use my contacts there, but we haven't managed to get that yet. But we're working on it. Again, I wanted to add some more examples on product level how this looks. Here, you see like how we explain also decisions, because I think the trick is not only to say, okay, I'm making an optimal decision for you, but to also explain it later on, right? Because even if the pricing team has the power to do what they want, they still need to explain to the merchandise manager what they did. And you can see here, I think when a merchandise manager is asking, okay, why did we choose 204 euros for this product? Then the answer is in this case that yes, we made predictions for this product. We predicted different price options with different roundings and so on. And then we actually decided to use a rule in this case that the optimal price should sit exactly on the minimum competitor price. And that is why this price comes out, right? And you can see directly it's not the proper optimal price for this product, but still it was selected. And I think from my perspective, this is also fine. Yeah, if this is coming out in the end, sometimes it can be a strategic decision to go there. That's okay, but it's important to know why a price was executed in the end. Yes, this is another example for another product, also for the minimum competitor price here. I think it's the same topic that we discussed earlier on, that this rule often doesn't maximize profit in the long term, because obviously it doesn't connect to your stock levels. Yeah, so I think often you see on many like high demand products that kind of the collective internet is sold out because everybody's just doing price matching, and they don't figure out that they don't have enough stock on this product, and they figure it out too late, and then everybody's sold out on this product in the end. If they would have made a prediction up front to see, okay, do I have enough stock for the season, then they just kind of could have not used this rule, this minimum competitor rule on this product at least, in order to protect the margin on that precious stock that you have. So this is definitely, again, in high price environments, I think this is a must-have. You need to check in the long term, do you have enough stock, especially if we have stock issues again, like with like deliveries and so on. you cannot always restock on all products. Therefore, it's important to think about like long-term effects as well. Often in the short term, yes, the minimum competitor price is even profit maximizing. It can be, but not always it is like that. But in the long term, it quite often isn't, especially if you have stock issues. If you have unlimited stock, obviously it's a different topic. Yes, I think that is what I wanted to cover. Now, any more questions from your end? I'm seeing that the poll definitely, most people did differentiated price increases so far, actually. Okay, then let me maybe just make a last summary. Yeah, maybe coming back to the agenda. Okay, there is a question actually. How do you measure global availability on a product? That's one of the questions. I think this question is towards the question if you know like how generally a product in the market is sold out. That's not what I meant. Of course, that's super difficult to know the stock level of your competitors. I think that's often not possible. But what I meant is that you can do that calculation on your own, right? You can do that calculation when you look at your own stock, kind of checking, okay, let's say the summer product, we are in the summer season, we are at the peak of that season, and in the next 8 weeks, I'm expecting that development of the season, and then you can measure, like, do you think so? What we are often, let me maybe show you a slide where I'm explaining this. Otherwise, it's complicated. Right. I mean, you're sometimes in this situation that, I mean, you want to sell out your product until liquidation end, right? And then you're sometimes selling too fast, or sometimes you're selling too slow, and that's what you have to find out during over time. In which scenario are you? And that is not so easy because obviously the seasonality of products is quite different. So on dresses, the peak is during summer, but not when there's summer holidays. And then on pullovers, it's obviously during winter. And if you look at specific product categories, the season curves are very, very different, and that you have to consider when you're doing your long-term prediction, obviously. And then what we're doing is basically to calculate liquidation and profit. What we're basically considering there is like the profit in season, and then the profit at liquidation end, which is essentially the loss that you're making on the stock that is left over at that point. And if you know these two things, you can count them together, and then you know like what is the best long-term profit that you can make. Yeah, I hope this was covering your question. So maybe just as a last, as a summary, I know there's one more question from Caspar. When you talk about long-term prediction, what time horizon do you normally mean? 12 months or longer? Yeah, so the time horizon we're using there is we're asking for a specific date on the product. And it could be 12 months, but it often is also just 6 months, depending really on the product, when the product is supposed to be sold out. So the idea here is really to use that for seasonal products or products that have an end date. Of course, if you are selling something that has an end date because you have to throw it away at a certain point, then that's easy. Then this is the date. On seasonal products for like summer or winter, it's just the end of summer or end of winter. But it could also be a product that you want to deactivate at some point in time. So let's say you have just an old product, it's already 4 years or 9, and you just want to deactivate it in 1 year, then you can kind of say, okay, that deactivation end date, that's the end date, and then we're predicting until that date. So it could also be longer, actually. And then the tricky part here is to understand, like, what is the value of that product at that end date, right? If it's an apple, for example, you can just throw it away because you cannot sell it after that date anymore. If it's boxer shorts black, then you can still sell it in the next season, and you should not write it off at that end date. It's probably not even a seasonal product in the first place. So it really depends on the product. It depends on what money can you still make with that product at that end date. Yeah. Okay. Another question from Caspar: how do you handle carryover products in the prediction model when the same style can sell in both spring and spring? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. You can sometimes carry over products to the next spring season, but first, I mean, I wouldn't recommend doing that with all products, because then your website becomes really old at some point and has a lot of bad size distribution. And if you have carryovers, I would recommend setting the end value to the purchase price, right? It's basically at least to the purchase price, at least, or even at a little bit higher level than the purchase price. Let's say you're estimating that you can sell the product in the next spring season for 120% of the purchase price, then that would be your end value. So what you're basically telling the optimizer is that if you can sell it for more than that value during the current season, then you should go that low with the discounts. But I mean, in many cases, the end liquidation value is like super low. It's like 30% of the purchase price, because if you're really liquidating a product, it's very expensive. So it actually makes sense to be very, very aggressive on those products sometimes, and even lose money on those products to avoid the write-off. Okay, yeah. So I was trying to cover market developments today. I think we're again in that higher inflation period that we were in 2022-23. We looked at some real world examples, how companies reacted on it, and I hope we were able to learn a little bit from that. It's not price increases will always work in the short term. There's no doubt about it. It's working well. But often they had long-term effects, which were negative in those real-world examples. I think the solution is to, I covered multiple solutions, but the biggest one I would say is using predictions to simulate what happens if you're changing something. Pricing is very impactful, and it's important to simulate the impact upfront. And this is what I was showing in number 4 also, to simulate what happens. And then you can have multiple options, A, B, C, D. And you can then decide based on the simulations what you want to do. And that generally helps you to get through that period in a better way than rule-based pricing. And these simulations also allow you to do a target-based steering with less rules. So you can steer to specific business goals that you have instead of using rules for that. And that should generally help you to get through these inflationary periods. Okay, then yeah, thank you so much. Thank you also for being so active and asking questions. It's just much nicer getting questions all the time than just having that monologue going. If there's more questions coming up, please also add me to LinkedIn or on LinkedIn, or just write me a direct message. I think here's a link. Yeah, and then thanks a lot for your attention, and talk to you later. Bye-bye.